We are live.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Enjoy your Friday. I hope you're enjoying your Friday. We are coming to you live from our home studio. Well, it's not really a home studio.
Yes.
It's really just our home, and we have a microphone set up in front of it, and we're talking. But, anyways, home studio sounds cooler. So, but
Yes. Well, we are very, very excited. I've been really excited to kind of just share with you guys what I've been learning, what we've been talking about. And with this eclipse coming up, we just felt like we want to dive in. We want to jump into this, sharing with you guys. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this, and we're excited to bring you some perspectives and some things that we've been learning about and studying about. So we're ready to jump right in. Are you ready, honey?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
ready.
Well, so this is so cool. So we wanted to start with just talking about how the heavens declare the glory of God. It's so huge. It's so important to understand. And if God was speaking to you, do you think you would know it? How do you know it? Do you think you would understand it? And what would you even do with it? Sometimes we think we can hear things or know God, and we're like, I was talking to Landry about that today, like certain things and praying and hearing Him, and how do you know? And I just think that really a huge part of this journey is it's a journey of the prophetic. It's understanding that God communicates with us because He's in a relationship with us.
Right.
And that's the most important part of a relationship is communication. So incredible.
Yeah, I also think too, just that it's kind of like if you're not hearing from God, then that's weird. Like
Mm,
if you think about any relationship that you have right now, whether it's a spouse, a son, a daughter, brother, sister, dad, mom, whatever, and how, if you never heard from them, what would your relationship be?
right.
Right. So I think it's important to understand God wants to and desires to talk to us. That is the nature of a relationship. I think God does it a lot of different ways, and I think He tailors it very specifically for the person, right?
Yeah.
Almost like an
Yeah.
inside joke between best friends, right? But by the same token, it should be something that you're regularly hearing from. And I think that God lays these things out. And obviously, I say that and then also say, and we want to be careful. We want to be careful and make sure that we really are hearing from God. We want to confirm that. But, it's not, it's only weird if God weren't communicating with us, right? So,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the things that we're living in right now, and we're witnessing the ending of a time and entering into a new time. And there's a lot of unknown. There's a
right.
lot of things that have changed in the last 4 years specifically. And we've been talking about this here. And we've really been on a huge, deep journey of alignment. We have since 2018. That's when we really started to learn about and dive into the Hebrew roots. And honestly, I don't even know if I would be aware of all of this if we hadn't have taken that pivot.
Yeah, I honestly
Seriously.
don't think that we would have. I think,
Yeah, we would not have blinders, like you got kind of get caught up in this certain way you do things. And I think God has really taken us on this huge pivot, this huge turn, and to go beyond what we knew. And really, we started digging into this, which opened up a whole new world for us.
right.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that's when all of this started. So much healing and stretching has happened in these last 6 years that I feel like we've been all along. Every time it's God preparing us, God speaking, and God pushing. And it's been awesome. And one of the things that has been so cool to dive into, which I wasn't even open to before, was how God placed the stars, the sun, and the moon for us to guide us and to communicate with us. And it's easy to see how important this is because of how hard the enemy has worked to hijack it. The occult has used astrology to bring people to believe that they have this power to know, guide, and heal. And it's just false. And all they can do is offer a shadow of truth because there is no power in their words and ultimately no real power of healing or guiding anyone. So as Christians, I know for me, I just when I'm not engaging with that, because to be totally honest, before I became a Christian as an adult, I was very much searching for truth and guidance anywhere. And I frequently went to card readers and to people that could lead me. I was so searching for something to lead me. And so when I became a Christian, it was like, oh, I'm not even going to engage with that at all, which obviously makes sense because I was engaging in the occult. And
Right.
so, but what is missing is that then you just shut the door to how God desires to communicate with us through this. And we miss that. We miss the beautiful ways of communicating out of fear or even just out of not knowing, not understanding. And so we want to do a deep dive into this upcoming eclipse because it's important. The timing, the message, it's a powerful way that God is equipping his saints. So that's why we're here today and we want to jump in. We really want to jump into
Yeah,
that.
and I think when you're seeking God, you obviously you want to hear from Him. And of course, we probably there's a part of us that would love for it to be that big dramatic Moses on Mount Sinai kind of experience. Maybe it will be. I'm never going to put a box on God, but that's probably not the way that we're experiencing Him. Um, but these are also not ordinary times. And God has trusted all of us to be alive at this time, at this moment in history. And there's a reason for that. And I'm not going to presume to know all those reasons, but I do know that there is one. There is God doesn't randomly do anything.
Yeah.
There's nothing that he does that doesn't have a purpose behind it. And so the constellations, rather than predicting the future, are simply reflecting what has happened. And they're reflecting God's patterns that he's set in place from the very beginning.
Mm.
And it's interesting because up until Jesus came, all of these constellations really reflect the stories that ultimately lead to Jesus, right? And then once Jesus came, then now we have a different angle to look at those stories. But the bottom line is it's the same author for all the stories. It's all God. And so I think it's important to remember that that's the only one we can really trust is him. It's the only one we know is putting the truth out there. And he's not putting it out there so that we can be like him, right? And create future. He's putting it out there so that we can know that he is at work. We have the assurance that God has a plan and a purpose in things. Because
So
right now it feels very much like, what is the plan? What is the purpose? What is going to go on next? And while we may not know the details of that, you can know the person who's in charge of all the details. And that's where your confidence can come from, is through him. So
so
back, when God was creating all of this, he said, let there be lights in the firmament, right? God set up the stars with our perspective in mind. There are 88 known constellations in the heavens, and they only look the way that they look from our particular field of vision, right? It's from our perspective that we see them that way. But in Genesis 1:14, it says, he did that to divide the day from night and to let them be signs and seasons for days and years. In other words, God wants us to be able to look to the heavens and be reassured that his
mm,
plan is in place, that he is in control, that he has our backs, irrespective of what's going on below on the world. And so these stars are there as signs. Troy Brewer, he has a teaching on this that I think is kind of neat. He says that a sign is something that proclaims a prophetic message, right? And a season is a prophetic appointed time. And we have these appointed times in both the spring and the fall. We have these appointed times at the beginning of each month. And I think you could even say the beginning of each week, right? God calls us to Sabbath with him. And that's really, each festival and occasion has its own nuance, but in a general sense, they're all about union with God. They're all about experiencing him more deeply, right?
Yeah.
And so these are called mohadim, right? An appointed time, these appointed times with God. So in Psalm 19, verses 1 through 3, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto night utters speech, and night into night shows knowledge, and there is no speech nor language. Their voice is not heard. That's kind of the King James. I think the NIV is a little better. I actually really like the Complete Jewish Bible as the translation I really, really like. But the NIV says that the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. So they're literally speaking to us.
Mm-hmm.
Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech. They use no words. No sound is heard from them. But these are the prophetic signs in the heavens that are actually the voice of God. The question, are we listening?
Mm-hmm. So good. Such a good question. Are we listening? Because we are here now at this time in history. And although it is said we do not know the day or the time when Jesus will come back, I found this very interesting. Um, I learned this from Troy Brewer actually this week as I was studying all this out. I was watching some of the things from him, and he gave an interesting perspective on this idea of not knowing the times because he said there are time zones. There are, I don't even remember how he said 20 something time zones and 2 days at any given time on this planet. And so, absolutely, there is not going to be 1 hour that is the same. And I thought that's an interesting perspective, very interesting to think about. We're just putting these things out there to mull over, right? There are many there are many prophecies that point to Jesus's return being during the fall feasts. It would make sense when you study these things out to think that that's probably when he was born, but we have no idea, and we are not going to dive into that in this video. So,
Yeah,
but
maybe another
one
one, but
thing,
not today.
not today. But one thing the Bible makes clear is that we want to be ready. We definitely want to be ready. We do not want to miss our day of visitation. I
Yeah,
love how that's worded, right? So we're responsible for being a watcher, for being aware, and God gives us signs everywhere. And that's why we're so passionate about living in alignment with his calendar, because we want to be aware. We want to be awake. We want to know, right? I know that I lived way too long in a state of obliviousness to the spiritual battle, and then ultimately to the great guidance of God. And this is an exciting time to be alive, even though it can feel kind of overwhelming sometimes because things are different. We don't know what's happening right now. So it does. And I love how Dan was saying that the stars in the constellations are there to remind us that God is in control, that he does. We know we can trust him. Um, in Luke 21:25, it says, there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars. Now, when these things happen, look up and lift your head because our redemption draws near. And the heavens are declaring this right now.
yeah. It's really a cool thought. And I think as we kind of move forward, I want to maybe backtrack a little bit, talk about history. I love history, taught history. It's always my thing. But I think history also gives us some perspective. The Assyrians destroyed 29 cities before they got to Jerusalem. And then God told his people at that time not to fear, that he would protect them. And he sent an angel, and that one angel destroyed 185,000 Assyrians. Angels, man.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we always think of like, oh, it's just a cute little cherub with those wings, and no, well, no, no. Angels are awesome, but they are not to be trifled with. And so the commander of the Assyrians went back after this colossal defeat and built an incredible palace at Nineveh. This palace was filled with paintings on how he had conquered the Jews. And these were very explicit paintings. One thing that's, I think, interesting to note is that Assyria is now modern day Iraq. And the palace where ancient Nineveh stood is actually the modern day city of Mosul in northern Iraq. And so when we think of Iraq and Mosul, probably what calls to mind, at least in recent memory, are wars. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where some of the fighting was heaviest. And there's lots of atrocities that go along with those wars. And so it brings a lot more to life to kind of help us realize that we're living out history. You know, history operates in cycles on a linear path, right? It's always moving in cycles as it moves down this path, right? And so Nineveh was actually located on the eastern bank of the Tigris River. It was the capital of Assyria. It was the largest city of the Assyrian Empire. In fact, it was the largest city in the world for a long time, probably several decades at least.
Mm.
And then, of course, you tie that in. So that's a little bit of a backdrop. And now we bring in the story of Jonah, right? So God is asking Jonah to go to this city.
Wow.
Right?
We kind of understand his hesitancy.
Yeah, right. I mean, because without this perspective, we just kind of go, gosh, Jonah, what a whiny little, I mean, go to the freaking city and, say your piece, man. Come on, Well, there's a little more to the story than just that. And so he's being asked to go there to speak to the most evil and powerful leaders who are head of the most feared army in the world. So, I mean, I'm not saying it was okay. Jonah disobeyed God. That's never okay. But not for nothing, right? It wasn't just defiance for no reason at all, right?
Right.
So after Jonah runs, he gets swallowed by a great fish, and now he's walking through the palace, and he's looking at these pictures of all the inhumanities that the king had inflicted upon the people of Israel.
Wow.
Just a few years earlier. So again, I'm sure that probably only because of Jonah's experiences leading up to this point did he even get this far, because that had to be really something. This event with Jonah happened in 763 BC. And here's something else that's kind of interesting. On June 15th, 763 BC, there was an event that's happened known as the Assyrian Eclipse. Interesting.
Wow.
This eclipse happened on the day that Jonah the prophet walked into Nineveh. Yeah. A solar eclipse. Look it up. There's a picture of it on the NASA website. June 15th in 763 BC was the first day of Elul on the Hebrew calendar. And what was Jonah's message? Well, he gave Nineveh 40 days to repent. And on the 40th day is the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, which is also known as Judgment Day. The people heard Jonah, they saw the eclipse, and they repented. And the rest is history.
Yeah. Powerful, powerful. Imagine the sign. It's so amazing how God is, that he speaks through all of these things. And the eclipse happened. Everything went dark in the middle of the day, which makes me think of when Jesus died on the cross. In the middle of the day, everything went dark again. There are these signs that can only be God. There's only one way the moon is going to shut out the sun. There's only one person that can possibly control that, right? Incredible. So if we fast forward to Jesus's day, In Matthew 12:39, Jesus answers the people. They're asking him for a sign. And he says this: an evil, adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and no sign will be given to it except the sign of the prophet Jonah. Now, I've read that a lot, many times. And because whenever you're searching, for signs of the end of times,
Right.
that we go to that's one of the scriptures, right? The sign of Jonah, the sign of Noah, the sign of all these different things, right? And I have always kind of thought that meant, well, of course, because Jesus is going to be, when he died, before he was resurrected, he was in the earth for 3 days. There's that, that link to that story of that shadow. Jonah was a shadow of something greater coming later, right? Which is true, but that's not what Jesus was talking about. We get to see that the sign he was speaking of was when Jonah came, there was a solar eclipse. It's going to get dark. The people must have been kind of like, oh, wow, I better listen. We better listen. Because if you think about it, why else would they have listened to him? It's kind of like when Moses was speaking and all of a sudden, his staff turned into a snake. There's things God does to help the people hear it, right? So there was,
Visual aids.
yes, visual aid.
Visual aid.
Visual aid. So he was speaking at that time of the sign of Jonah, that there's going to be a solar eclipse. So these are things, and these signs are coming to light now, and it's urgent that we're aware. We want to be awake. We want to be ready. We want to fully understand the depth of this eclipse. And in order to do that, we wanted to go back again, some history, not as far back as Dan went, but to another eclipse that happened in 2017. So just barely 7 years ago. And it was known as the Great American Eclipse because it was the first time since 1776 that an eclipse had only touched America. So they called it the Great American Eclipse. I totally remember this. We were actually in California. I was standing in my mom's front yard. We were looking at this. It was so cool. No idea what this was all about at the time. So God placed it in our firmament from our perspective so that we could see it, because God speaks to his covenant people through the moon. And when he speaks through the sun, he's speaking to the nations. This message is for everyone. The first eclipse in 2017 lasted 1 hour and 33 minutes. That's how long it took for it to go across the whole country. And if we look at Psalm 33, it says, how pleasant it is for brothers to be in unity. What an incredible message. You could say it was a call for unity, right? The eclipse began on the West Coast in Oregon and it exited in North Carolina. It started in Salem and it passed over 7 cities called Salem in its shadow, right? Salem is a word for peace. I think about Jerusalem, the
Right.
word of that. It's the city of peace, Jerusalem. So the peace that is found in a total reconciliation with God. So the word in that first eclipse was this, that it was a message of unity. And you have 7 years. We know that there's very prophetic things in the numbers. 7 is a very prophetic number. So this next eclipse will happen on 4/8, on April the 8th. And 4/8, if you look in Exodus, it says, if they will not hear you and believe you for the first sign, they will for the second. I kind of feel like that's God speaking straight to me, because I'll tell you this, in 2017, I had no thought about an eclipse or the moon or the star, any of it. And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. This time I am listening. So now here we are approaching the 7th year. And actually, this is crazy. This is what I've heard, and I didn't do the actual looking this up, but I've heard this from multiple places, is that when this eclipse happens, it will be 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days from the original eclipse in 2017, which is crazy. Because we've also learned that 666 isn't exactly as bad as it's been portrayed, that there's double meanings there, right? It's another message, right? So this time the eclipse will go over 7 cities in America, and they all have the name Nineveh. So if you haven't heard that yet, jaw open, dropped. It was when I first heard that. It was like, wait, what? It's going over. I didn't even know there was places in America called Nineveh.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah. Who knew?
Who knew? There's 7 of them, obviously, and because we looked this up, it's going over all of them. So overall 7. It's starting in Texas. It's exiting in Maine. 7 is the number of completion. Powerful, right? So when it leaves the US, it's going to go through one more city of Nineveh, and that's in Nova Scotia. So that brings the number to 8. And 8 is the number of new beginnings. So God is speaking to us. Are we listening? That's our question. Are
Yeah.
you
And
listening?
we're offering this. These are things to really think about and to
Mhm.
pray about, right? I mean, we're not experts. We're just, these are some things that we learned, discovered, that we're sharing with you that we think are really interesting. And like I said, the only thing that we really stand on is that God speaks to us. He does.
Absolutely.
So I think these things, when you kind of take all of them in their totality, are very, very interesting. And we do need to pay attention, and we do need to look into it. We do need to start going, wow, well, let me investigate that. Because this is the second total eclipse in just the last 7 years. As Vicky mentioned earlier, the people of Nineveh mostly listened to Jonah because there was this sign accompanying Jonah's message.
Yeah.
They repented and they were spared. And now something greater than Jonah is here. Because when you put these two eclipse paths together, it actually makes an X. But in the Hebrew alphabet, it's a Tav. The Tav is the last letter of the alphabet, and it means the end. It means life or death. It also means truth and a sign. So when you come to an end, you're also coming to a beginning, right? This is what makes this so interesting, is because it's also the theme of our month, the Dar that we're in. There's this year we happen to be in a leap year, so there's actually 2 months of a Dar, but that's kind of an interesting thing to take into consideration, because now we're coming to an end, but that end, the purpose of it is so that a new beginning can happen.
Yeah.
In Joel 3:16, it says, the voice of God causes the heavens and earth to tremble, but the Lord will be a refuge for his people. Right? Again, it's all in union with God.
Mm-hmm.
God is always trying to get our attention. And again, the only question is, are we listening?
Yeah.
Are we listening? You know, these two paths crossing, they cross over America when the eclipse happens. The two paths of the eclipse from 7 years ago and the eclipse that's happening in April here, it's going to cross over a place in America called Little Egypt. It's just it's like,
So
it's almost like a movie script. It really
yeah.
does, you know. Um, but also at that crossing, uh, one of the shadows from each goes over a town called Alpha, and the other goes across a town called Omega,
Of
beginning
course.
and the end. Um, it So this cross that's overshadowing America forms the Hebrew Tov, right? And the message that we're hearing is to make sure that you are in covenant with Him. We're living in a time where maturity in our faith with God is not an option. Not that it ever was, but we live in times where it's less of an option than it ever was.
Yeah.
And wholeheartedness for God, all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength being poured into loving God. Again, never an option, but it's never been less of an option than it is right now, just because of the times in which we live.
Yeah. And also here's some other towns that the eclipse will be passing over. It's going to be passing over Jonah, Texas. It's going to also be passing through Rapture, Illinois, or Indiana, sorry. And then it's all happening in the constellation Cetus, which is the whale. It's actually the constellation of the whale. It means the whale. And then it's going to go through a place called the Ark in Williamson, Kentucky. All of those things. So crazy. Interesting. You can't think that this doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, you
Yeah,
really have to see that God is speaking. And what is he saying? What is he saying to each of us? All I know is that it's what I want to be aware and awake. And that's what we're why we're here today. We felt really strongly we wanted to talk about the eclipse before it happened. And I love one of the things that I also love about Troy Brewer. He's always so encouraging, and he's always saying, the sky is not falling, the kingdom is coming. Because sometimes it can feel like it's all falling apart, right?
yeah,
And I just made a post on Instagram about that, about how it can, like, when the seed it falls apart in order to bloom, it literally, the whole thing disintegrates. And it can
yeah,
feel like so much is getting, deconstructed, and it is. And so, but it is, the kingdom is coming, and we can boldly say the heavens declare the glory of God. We want to boldly say that, and we want to encourage you to really be connected.
yeah,
Find your tribe. If you are part of our membership, we meet twice a month on Zoom, and it is awesome, and we would love to see everyone there. Next Thursday we will be meeting for our third Thursday of the month, and we're going to be deep diving into what is God doing in our lives right now. It's an amazing opportunity when you get to talk about it. You
yeah,
kind of can journal about it, you can even pray about it, but when you get to share it, it's like a whole new perspective comes with that.
yeah,
So very, very cool. So we would just want to encourage you to really be connected. Be connected here, be connected where you go to church. If you have that, find that tribe to be connected. You want to be ready. And we are chosen as witnesses. That's what we get to be right now, is witnesses of such a time as this. Very, very powerful. So excited.
it's an
I
incredible time to be alive.
know.
That is for
Yeah,
sure.
there's a ton of you. Thank you guys so much for I haven't been looking at there's lots of you guys chiming in. I'm going to look at some of these, but what are your ending thoughts, Dan? And I'll look at some of these.
Well, I think, like I said earlier, a wholeheartedness towards God and really a maturity in our faith is so essential right now because every day we just need to strive to be in deeper union with God than the day before. It's not a time to get caught up on a bunch of religious box checking. It's really time to just set our hearts, our minds, our souls, our will in Him, and
Yeah.
and rest in that shalom that only He has for us. And I think that, like you said about finding the community, we would love if you were part of ours, but at the end of the day, you need to be in community. You need to be with other like-minded people that are trying to love God just as much as you are. Um,
Mhm.
and that's really what we need in this time. And I think it's just these big events like an eclipse that also
Mhm.
serve as reminders of the necessity of that. Because as you go through a day-to-day life, it's very easy to forget just exactly how much we need God. We need Him, and
Yeah.
we need Him every day. And it's awesome, and he's awesome. And so I
Yeah.
just encourage everybody to really lean into that and to step into that and to find it if you don't already have it.
Yeah, it's very powerful time, and it is a time to not be in fear, and to remember that all these signs are showing us that God has the story. He knows the ending, he knows this process.
Yeah,
And I love this. I think this might be Deanna that shared this. I'm not positive because I can't see names, but she said Elijah mentored Jonah also, which is very interesting. I didn't know that. I find that fascinating because God so often mirrors things. John, Elijah, Elisha, then Jonah. Psalm 33, so amazing. Yeah, I love that. And yeah, 7 years of famine in the book of Joseph. Exactly. Yeah, this is an interesting time when we think about what was happening 7 years ago. And it's such in our country, these last 7 years has been, I mean, you can feel the enemy trying to disunify.
yeah,
if you think about the messaging being unified, and I always think about Jesus's prayer in Gethsemane, you know, his prayer before he died was for unity, for us to know God the way he knew God, for us to be united like he's united, for all of these things. Actually, I'm not sure if he prayed that in Gethsemane, but I know it was one of his last prayers. And but it was his heart was for that. His pain was for that.
Mhm.
So yeah, the enemy is coming after it so much. We have never lived in my lifetime at a time when things were so divided, and the division is palpable. You feel it in families, in, you know, in cities, in everything. And so that's the message. And there has been a lot of good that has happened in spite of that, and there has been a lot of change. And I think
Yeah.
about all of those things. So I'm excited. I'm excited for April 8th. Oh, and I was going to grab them before, but I forgot. Get your glasses now. Get your
Oh
Eclipse
yeah.
glasses now, because I didn't last time, because we had an eclipse. What was it, in October of last year, I think. It was not a full eclipse like this one. It was different, but it was awesome. And
Yeah,
I
we
didn't.
didn't have our glasses, so I actually went blind looking into
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
My sight came back. Yeah, true story. No,
Yeah. Story.
uh,
So we got our glasses. We ordered them on Amazon. They're cheap. I actually saw them in the grocery store today for $1.50. So get your glasses, because we don't want to miss this one. We should maybe have an eclipse party out here in Texas,
yeah,
because it's passing right over us. So
yeah.
let me know if you guys are who are local, if we should do an eclipse party. I don't even know what day of the week that lands on though, but
I
but
don't
anyway,
know.
I'm all down for it. So we love you guys so much. We love doing life with you. We love this community. We
Yeah,
love Inspired Life and everything that's happening. And we're in this. We are
yeah.
so in this, in it. We're in it, and we can't wait to see what God is about to reveal. So we love your interaction here, and we'd
It's
love to
great
keep
spending
the
time with you guys
conversation
today.
going. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we love you guys.
All
So have
right.
a beautiful and blessed evening. Oh, and it's Shabbat we're moving into. So
Bye.
Shabbat Shalom, you guys.
Good Shabbatical.
Bye.